Congratulations, Carolyn Goodall. You have written and produced this film, The Bay of Silence. Now, without giving anything away, how would you describe Bay of Silence?
Bay of Silence is a Hitchcock-style psychological thriller starring Claes Bang as Will, Olga Kurilenko as Rosalind, and Brian Cox as Milton. I think it's references films such as Don't Look Now and The Vanishing, which were incredibly important to me when I was growing up. I really love a psychological thriller. It's based on the book by The Bay of Silence by Lisa Santaban de Turin, who in the 80s and 90s was a highly awarded writer. She's still writing prolifically. She actually lives in Mozambique right now. Slow Train to Milan was one of her first novels that really took off. Mike Radford tried to make a movie of it for years. I believe I'm the first person to actually have made a movie based on one of her novels. And it is the story of a couple who are deeply in love, who throw themselves into their love story without necessarily knowing each other very well. And unbeknownst to Will, the man, who is really a very wonderful, loving, kind of, I guess, modern kind of guy, he doesn't understand that there are secrets that are buried deep in her past that include mental health issues based on a past that she is trying to repress. There are, of course, some Me Too moments. And she disappears, and he crosses Europe to find her, finds her eventually in Normandy in this little Gothic village. And he is confronted by the death of his child, his baby son. And unable to believe that she is responsible because she is also seems psychologically traumatized, he makes a decision from which he can't go back. He's terrified at the idea that the police might accuse her of killing his son. He doesn't know how he died. He doesn't have a mark on his body. And in a way, in a bit of an echo of the Madeleine McCann case and The Vanishing, he makes a decision and he buries the child. But from that moment, of course, he's buried the truth. And as she starts to improve psychologically, she has repressed all memory of what happened. And of course, he does start to suspect, and he needs to find out what happened through his grief and his guilt. And so you have this sort of interesting kind of dynamic that happens, and it's a very relationship-filled story.
What are the themes in the story that really shook you and motivated you?
Three, I think. Mental health, and how we never necessarily really know our partner. How well do we know our partner? The way that lies and secrets operate within relationships and in the world. And then this central moment, which is, how do you deal with an impossible situation? And of course, that's what the best sort of thrillers and melodramas are about, you know, ordinary people thrown into extraordinary circumstances, and how do they fight their way out? And of course, as an audience, we sit there on the edge of our seat, you know, seeing something happen, and we want to scream, no, don't do it. And of course they do. And I've just been a huge fan as well. I think when I read this book, which is actually written from both points of view, and I did toy with the idea maybe of making this from both points of view, but a feature film really does, I think, have to have a linear storyline, and especially if you want to tell it with a sort of psychological thriller kind of skeleton around it. And we've got very used, I think, with our TV watching and this long form for sort of multi point of view storytelling. But I think the issue I always find is that I don't find them totally satisfying, because in the end I actually can't remember them. And there is something about that sort of linear focus, which you see, whether it's Polanski or Hitchcock or Nick Rogue, that sort of the audience is learning at the same time as the main protagonist, which I've just always found really, really satisfying when telling a story.
You seem to be reacting against this tendency of just piling storyline upon storyline in films today.
Yeah, I just prefer something cleaner, although actually I've been told that this film has got so many twists and turns, and there is an A plot and there's a B plot, and at one point the B plot takes over from the A plot, and that is that sort of shifting moment, which, you know, is quite complex, because you're actually asking people to take in an episode that is really challenging, which is how he deals with the death of his child, and then move into the next one, which is him discovering about his wife Olga Kurilenko's past and why what happened, and to deal with that. And so they kind of fold like that. And as she starts to get better, he starts to go down the rabbit hole and get worse. And the balancing of that was something that we had quite a discussion about, both just in the shooting and of course in post as well, as to how to make both those very important and very deep, dark subjects actually resonate at the same time and not take away from each other. And whether we've been successful, I've really no idea.
Now, Carolyn Goodall, you are, by any fair measure, an accomplished actress with a very impressive CV. So, explain to us why such a successful actress would choose to do something as crazy as write and produce an independent film.
Because I think we're all a bit crazy. Oh Lord, I think it's like anything, isn't it? You are fortunate enough to get to a point where you actually kind of understand a lot about the business that you're in, and most people want to embrace what they do if they love it even more. And actors are always writers, because inevitably, even if you're not actually scribbling on the page, you're writing that character by filling in all the blanks and the pauses, and, you know, discovering and digging deep into who you are. And I've always written. I went to Bristol University and did a drama and English degree, and most of my contemporaries ended up either, you know, running the BBC or the RSC, or being writers or directors, and I was actually one of the minority who became an actor. I'm married to a cinematographer, and my sister's a line producer. And so I probably spend more time hanging around people who make the movies from behind the camera than in front of it. And they have zero respect for actors anyway. So I guess I had to kind of step up and, you know, try and get some respect out of them. But I think storytelling is in all our DNA, and whether you're an actor or you're a writer or you're a director, or you know, you're still trying to tell a story. And as actors, I think we all want a little bit more control. And if you actually look at lists of people who are now very big producers, perhaps, or big directors, most of them started off as actors. So it's not that unusual.
To be clear, I'm presuming that you were very comfortable and very contented as an actress. Now, making an independent...
I still am.
Yes, oh, of course. Making an independent film is always a rough ride. It's a tough thing to do, and it's risky. You are really putting yourself up there. You've chosen at this point to step outside that comfort zone, outside that contentment zone, and taken a pretty sizable risk. You've explained to a degree why you did that, but I just wanted to put it in those terms that you were contented and you could have just kept on going in that mode, but you chose to shift modes. Can you just tell us a bit about why you did that?
I don't think I've shifted modes. I've just expanded modes, if that makes sense. While I was producing this film, I actually made 3 television series and 2 feature films at the same time. So I think great thing about being an actor, especially in front of the camera, is that you are able to do both. The only time you have to even sign a contract saying that you are exclusive to a project is actually during production as a producer. And shooting takes 6 weeks. We shot this film in 32 days. And the rest of the time, you've got a big team around you. And you've got a director who you trust, and they're going to go into their 12 weeks of editing the film, and you're going to be seeing the cuts, but you don't want to interfere with them unduly. Paula van der Oost is an extraordinarily experienced director, and she's been nominated for Best Foreign Film for an Oscar, and it was important that I gave her space and her team her space. I've got amazing actors. I was just so grateful that they were able to come on board, and you leave them to do their thing. And actually, as a producer, I think the big baptism of fire for me was the fact that I really did lead produce this and financed it the age-old way, by pre-sales and finding grant funding and, private equity. I've got 4 fantastic private equity investors. And there was just like a fire to put out every single day. So I had my writing hat on, and then I kind of took that off and I handed that over. And then I very much was in the nuts and bolts of the production side. And I have to say, I really, really enjoy that. My father was a businessman, and I quite like numbers. And I think perhaps if we can drill down, I think actors tend to get a bit of a bad rap. We're told we're silly, we're patted on the head. People prefer to see us as perhaps just a little frivolous, because it suits them. And maybe something somewhere in me stirred, and I thought, I don't want to be seen as just an adjunct to this business. I want to be kind of a deeper part of it, and I've got stories to tell as well. And why do I always have to be reading scripts and either accepting them or saying no, and often making them a lot better, which we all do. We work very hard to make scripts that we receive a lot better when we're finally doing them. And maybe it'd be nice to just sort of see how it is on the other side, as well, and show that it's not rocket science. We tend to get told that, the really important stuff of movie making is done by the executives and by the producers and by everybody else, And I think there was a part of me that wanted to say, we're all in this together. Does that help?
In describing the raising of the finance and the putting out a fire every day, you seem to really enjoy that. Some people would say, oh, it's just a headache after headache. It sounds very much, Carolyn Goodall, like you enjoy the Sturm and Drang of producing a film. You like the drama.
Well, yeah, I really do, because the irony is that's what acting is as well. You have to make choices. You have to be so flexible. You've got to be constantly available and there for people. You have to also always tread that line between, you know, making sure that what you say is acceptable to the hierarchy around you. And that hierarchy quite often has absolutely no compunction in telling you that you're a complete jerk. So I think the irony is that being a producer means that you're using all those skills and tools as well. But strangely enough, you don't have that incredible emotional weight on your shoulders of carrying a film. And I have to say that was one thing that I really liked. I mean, once, of course, you know, okay, I wrote the thing, so I feel totally culpable. But at the same time, I could take my own calls in the morning so I could get some sleep. I didn't have to wake up in the morning and think, oh my God, now I have to cry over my, you know, a dead body, and how am I going to do that? And have everybody else have their breakfast and look at their watches going, God, I wish she'd hurry up. You know, you're so aware as an actor that every minute is money, and you've got to kind of just get there. And sometimes if you can't get there, what do you do? And everybody else actually can just kind of slack off a bit, even though they might have their moments that are just, you know, intense. But the emotional intensity of filmmaking tends to lie on the actor's shoulders, and I would say the director, of course, because the director has to really feel they're going to make their day, and that they're telling the story in the way that they envisage the story. Because you're never going to get what your vision is. You're never going to, you know, get every shot that you want. I mean, that is for huge studio movies. This is our movie that we went to 3 different countries. It's a very complex film, and we had a very, very tiny budget, and everybody just pitched in. But I've also been used to making films. You know, I made the first $100 million film. I made the second $100 million film. You know, Hook was the first and Cliffhanger was the second. It's 6 months to make it, and loads of time. And God bless Steven Spielberg. Because if you wanted to go again, he'd go again and go again and go again until he got it. So you had enormous freedom as an actor. But now, I mean, you know, in the last 20 years, and especially since digital, there is no time for anything. The budgets have shrunk, and everybody is tired, and everybody is running around, and everybody is desperately trying to make the day. And you know, maybe that's another thing as well. You know, the financiers do expect an enormous amount, and tax credits, if we're now going into sort of the financing end of things, you know, grant funding and tax credits, where the financiers add up exactly what they're going to get back within the budget from what you've spent, means that every single penny is accounted for, and you can't go into overages. And because they're saying, well, this is what I need to get back in order for me to take the risk of putting the money in. And the market has very much dictated what the budget of a film is going to be. And so therefore, the artistic freedom that you are so desperate for when you're trying to tell a story that is then going to be out there in front of an audience, it gets slimmer and slimmer. So that, I think, also was something that I was very interested in discovering more about, because I think if you've been on sets for 30 years at different budget levels and watched people of different disciplines, some of whom are amazing and some less so, you get a sense of the temperature of a set and how to run it and how to speak to people. And my big thing, I think, and I, you know, don't know if I succeeded, but my big thing was, please give everyone the space to be able to do their job the best that they possibly can, and to make decisions that weren't necessarily financially motivated, but as well that they were sort of aesthetically motivated. Because you do get this siloed mentality between production and the sort of more artistic side, which would be, you know, whether it's the director or the production design or whatever. I do remember one thing was very interesting. We were having a conversation about vehicles, and the second AD said, "Do you realize that, you know, we're 70,000 over budget on vehicles?" And I said, "Well, which vehicles are you talking about? We've only really got two that we really need." And she said, "No, no, 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 because you see that scene, we're going to have vehicles in the street, and then of course, you know, we've got Candy coming up, and you know, she has a car." And I said, "No, no, she doesn't have a car." "Yes, she has a car. It's in the script." And I said, "Well, I wrote the script, so she doesn't have a car." "No, no, it's in the script. She has a car, and that costs." And I thought, wow, because they get really focused on finishing the job that's in hand and sending that over to somebody else, saying, you're going to have to find another 50 grand there. And you've got the producer, who is also the writer, in front of you saying, "Well, I can change that. I can take that page out," or, you know, "We don't need to see that through the window. Just because it's written, pulls up, honks through the window, we don't need to do that. I can actually cross that line out, and we can have the bell rings, or they just come in through." And I just thought, wow, that is so interesting that people are creating such problems where they're not necessary.
Given what you just said, was there one or two specific things that you learnt, given your experience with film and television? Was there something that you actually learnt while making this film?
I learnt every day. I learnt you have to be so detail oriented. You have to pick your battles. God, you have to be as kind and compassionate, as nice as you can possibly be every day. Never lose your temper or your cool. Make sure everyone's happy if you possibly can, and realize that you're never going to make everybody happy. And always look at the bottom line. And that means the financial bottom line as well, but also be prepared to take the hits if you can. Yes, this is a business, but also when you're in the midst of it, you have to see that there are likely to be things that are just going to inevitably throw you sideways. I mean, Italy was a case in point, if I'm allowed to go on a bit, and please do stop me. But we had a freak, you can only call it a twister. We went to Italy in the height of the tourist season to go to a World Heritage Site, which was absolutely packed with people on July the 9th, 2018, at the height of the Italian Riviera holiday experience. And our Italian co-producers managed to do miracles, and we managed to clear the bay so that we could get these extraordinary shots of them appearing to be completely alone in that water. And that was a feat in itself. But we had these shots planned through the tunnel that is the opening of the film. There's a motorbike that comes out of a tunnel in Liguria. That morning there was a twister that came off the sea, and that with all our costumes were flooded, our makeup room was flooded, because we had our base was right by the bay in Sestri Levante. And in the afternoon we had to go and do these tunnel sequences, and we got there late. And so we were fighting everything, not just the weather, but also the time. And we'd shut down the tunnel, and it was the only entry to get down to, in Cinque Terre, if you've ever been there, there's just one entrance in and out down to these tiny little picturesque villages by the sea. And we had cut off the tunnel, and we get a call, and the police suddenly tell us to pack up. And the reason being was that the mayor's wife had come back from shopping and she needed to go home. And she was extremely angry that she was forced to wait outside the tunnel for what appeared to her probably far too long. To us was only about 10 or 15 minutes, as we kind of tried to get the shop.
Carolyn Goodall, you have a remarkable cast in this film, some of whom joined you as co-producers. Can you just tell us a little bit about how such a low-budget film gets such a high-powered name cast?
Well, I think, yes, look, the one upside of being an actor, it is a double-edged sword, because actually you can write a script and then you give it to people who are in the business, and it's the last one they're going to open because they're terrified they may not like it. But I was very fortunate. Brian Cox has been a great friend of mine since 1985, when we were in the Royal Shakespeare Company together, and he always said, if you need me, I'll be there, and he was. And he is, of course, an actor magnet. And Olga Kurilenko read the script, and I just felt she was completely right for Rosalind, because I needed somebody who was a bit mysterious, cross-border, had a throwback neo-noir kind of feel. She's got a great sort of Rosalind Russell kind of look to her. She Faye Dunaway, thinking Chinatown, for example. And she speaks many languages, and I needed Rosalind to speak French and preferably Italian, whereas Will, of course, wouldn't be speaking those languages. And that's one of the reasons he does what he does, is because he finds himself a fish out of water in France, can't speak the language, terrified to go to the police in case they misunderstand him, and his wife is locked up. So my husband was working with Olga at the time on Terry Gilliam's film The Man Who Killed Don Quixote, which is another whole story in itself. And he said, she's a wonderful actress, why don't you try her? And so I slipped her the script, and she said, yes, I'd love to do this. And she waited for me for a year. And Claes Bang I saw in the square, and he was just sort of, the world was just discovering him. And I got him the script through my casting director, and thought that, this is the man I need. He speaks perfect English, but he hasn't got that Englishness, because what I didn't want from Will was someone who was class-based. And in the UK, it's very, very hard to find an actor who we don't then pigeonhole according to where he might have come from. So either he has to have an accent that is Northern or Scottish or Irish to kind of give him a sense that, he's sort of working class, or he's got from nowhere, or else, they're all a bit posh. And I didn't want that feeling at all. I needed him to be every man in that sense, in that sort of Hitchcock way that Jimmy Stewart is every man. And they all three of them have this wonderful sort of throwback. They're all iconic actors, just in terms of who they are, and archetypal kind of faces that could be, in a neo-noir. And that's what I needed, that feeling, but also someone, actors who are incredibly contemporary at the same time, who could dig down into the emotions, but also cross that balance between melodrama and, kind of very naturalistic contemporary style of work that is what we need from our artists these days. So I just feel so blessed to have had them. And yes, I said to them both, would you like, to be executive producers? Because I do really feel strongly that actors have so much to offer and give. And, a title is always a nice thing. And to have some, to feel that you are going to be listened to. And they were, and I have to say, they both, brought me so much, and director ideas, and also Claes was very, very instrumental in helping me find some money when it fell out. So I just take my hats off to them, and I just, hope that they're satisfied with what we eventually got as well. And they've just been so supportive of the film. So it's, yes, a very little tiny movie that we hope might be seen in the world. And of course, we're very sad that we don't have our red carpet moments, which to a certain extent, just, our celebrations, they kind of draw a line under all the hard work you've done, as well as we shot anamorphic. It would have been wonderful for people to see this on the big screen, but it is what it is. And I'm just really grateful that we're getting it out there. And it is a character-driven piece, and it can work very, very well on the smaller platforms. And everyone has huge, big widescreen TVs now, so I hope they watch it on that too.
Are you going to reveal the budget of the film?
Oh yeah. We were £3 million. But a lot of that, of course, goes in legal fees and finance fees and all the rest of it. So, where there wasn't a hell of a lot after all of that happens to play with. And we do go to 3 countries.
That's incredible. You made this film for the equivalent of about 6 million Australian dollars.
Yeah. God, is it really 2 to 1? Oh, I thought it was...
It's around 2 to 1, but I know that...
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, thank you, Paola and Guido, for making it look so beautiful. And I think that's the irony as well, is that, when people see films, they don't actually think about the amount of days it might have taken, and maybe they shouldn't, or the amount of money that was thrown at something. But there is a huge difference, especially even in a film like this, between a $30 million film and a $3 million film. We made this film for a third of the cost of one episode of Game of Thrones. And what people forget is that television is now the most expensive medium in the world. And that the amount of time they have to do 1 hour of television is massive. And the money that they can throw at it, of course, a lot of it's special effects, is huge. And movies, we've always felt, were kind of like, the older sister or brother, and TV was the little thing that could. But it's totally the other way. The films are now the radio of, the entertainment industry in that sense, in terms of budgets, on so many levels, especially independent films.
Well, congratulations. That's extraordinary what you've done.
Oh, well, I just have to thank my team. I think, we were very pressed for time. Inevitably, of course, we were. But everyone just kind of pulled together and did it. They really did. Yeah. So,
as you have opened this new chapter in your career at age you're around 60, you're 60 years old, but you started this project, I understand, about 5 years ago.
Yes, actually, finance. Just putting the line in the sand and say, I'm going to do this. Yes. It takes time, a lot of time.
I would like some comment about how you feel opening up this chapter in your career at this stage in your life. Did you give it a second thought?
Oh, my God, yes. And listen, thank you for asking. And please don't feel that you have to beat around the bush. I think there's 3 parts to this. Number one, of course, as a woman, I felt so fortunate. My big break was Hook and working with Steven Spielberg, and then being fortunate enough to work with him again. And then I was, that opened so many doors for me. And I was sort of, going down the writing and sort of wanting to produce route just around that time, actually. I'd spent 10 years in the theatre at the Royal Shakespeare Company in the National in the United Kingdom. And wanting to kind of spread my wings, and of course, also finding myself in Australia, because let's not forget my Australian connection. I've got more family in Australia than anywhere in the world. It just so happened that I was born and raised in London because my dad had a business there, although his mother was Australian, and so that's where I was raised. And I used to go to Sydney as a child and just say it's just so unfair. Why are all my cousins running around and swimming in the sea and going, racing down the bottom of the garden and jumping into the water, and there I am in London. So for me, branching out, being global was a huge thing, and Australia gave me so much. So I kind of felt that it was a little churlish to actually try and do any more than just justify people's faith in me and to be as good an actor as I possibly could. And of course, then I got married and I had children. And I do believe it's very, very important to be able to just give your children the space and the time to grow up and to be there with them. So when I kind of came to this, it was, yeah, I mean, life just had gone on. But at the same time, I did sort of worry. I thought, will anyone take me seriously? This is a younger person's game, but I have a ton of energy. And I had to talk to myself quite often and just say, you have to do what you have to do. If men in their late bloody 70s are running to be president and they think that they can, handle everything, then why the hell can't we just do this, which in real terms is very, very small in comparison? And I think that women increasingly are realizing that, unless you just stand up and say, I'm going to do this, no one is going to give you a handout or a leg up. They're really not. But we just have to do it with graciousness and with as much knowledge base as possible, and just not back down.